I was just going to ask, do I have to use the mic in room?
Yeah, you have to use the mic.
Before we get started, I want to introduce you to somebody on the podcast.
Check. Hey, everyone, we're about to start, so grab a chair if you don't have one. Thank you all for being here. 1 minute. We're going to start in 1 minute.
Hey, Nick, you ready? Nick, you ready?
Check. Hey, everyone, if I could have your attention, we're going to start the show. Really grateful that you're here. My name is Human. I'm the creative director of the Park James Hotel. Thank you so much. And we normally do 11 of these a year. This is our 11th, so this will not be our last show of the year. We'll probably try to sneak one in October and November. This is Nick Larson. He is the man behind the Silicon Zombies. Nick Larson. And that's his beautiful wife, Sandra. And where's Michael Knopfsinger? Is he still outside? All right. We'll introduce him at the end. So everyone, thank you for coming. If this is your first time here, we do this every month, a speaker series in partnership with the Silicon Zombies. The show gets about 150,000 downloads per episode on Spotify. So if you know of any amazing guests that you'd love to be a part of this, please come and talk to us at the end. We are very fortunate to get David Eagleman tonight. You're going to hear a lot about him and the brain and the way he perceives the brain. Lastly, we have a 4-star restaurant here. We have a Michelin star chef. So if you want to hang out and eat afterwards, we'd love that, or drink, or just, and if you're not a part of the community, go find Sandra at the end, give her your email, be her friend on LinkedIn. She will add you to the Luma. Now, before we start the show, Nick, grab your mic. Nick and I and Sandra and a few others were doing an event at another hotel, which is one of our sister properties, called the Ameswell. It's in Mountain View. It's called Ageless Evolution. Nick, tell everyone a little bit about this event.
Thank you, Human. Check. All right. Well, so essentially, Ageless Evolution is all about living well and aging less. So let's think about, for a quick moment, the times in our life that make life just really worth living. Maybe it's the smell of freshly baked bread, or a belly laugh with your friends and family, or digging your toes into the sand, or a cool sip of water on a hot day. So these are the kinds of moments that make life really sweet. So why not extend our lives? And we can learn how to do that with by uncovering the biotech of tomorrow, and better ways to have better sleep and nutrition and exercise. You'll get this and more. All sorts of really cool experiences on October 10 at the Ageless Evolution Summit. We're going to do some special tickets tonight for how much, Sandra? $80, which is $120. That's a 60% discount. So talk to this lovely young lady.
Hey, Nick, is it true that it's almost sold out?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this is your last opportunity.
We sold out last year. In fact, this year we're going to have the Ageless Experience Pavilion. So all sorts of really cool stuff outside on the tent.
And so the reason we chose David Eagleman for tonight is because this is the appetizer to what you're going to see at the Ageless Evolution, all right? The doctors and the speakers are going to be at this level, if not better. Just kidding, David. Just kidding.
Be nice to me.
All right.
So just so quickly, the code for that is PreParty 80. PreParty 80, which is right up here. So if you want to scan the QR code, that'd be great. And also, speaking of the brain, we're going to have Dr. Arbella Sarkis come say a couple words about TB006. Dr. Sarkis, please.
Yeah, thank you.
Glad to be here. Well, TB006 is a new medication that came in the market in infusion to reverse dementia, all kind of dementia, no matter from aging, from related to Parkinson's disease, Lewy body, from trauma. Frontal temporal dementia right now is really bad. It's very showing up at the early age, even before age 55. So with this new medication, which is a monoclonal antibody, anti-galactin-3. Galactin-3 is a protein which we produce in our body to control cell to cell and cell growth and many other activities in our bodies, in all our organs. Sometimes, for some reason, probably autoimmune diseases or due to diet, environmental, not sure, or maybe a combination of all of that, patients produce too much of galactin-3, and that starts to damage the brain, causing tau protein formation, beta amyloid, and damaging this brain cells called macroglia. So that's why when the brain is damaged, it starts to shrink and we start becoming forgetful. Now, this medication goes other way around, destroying beta amyloid, destroying tau proteins, regenerating a macroglia of the brain, and regenerating brain where patient starts to remember again. I had close to 130 cases since I started with my mom as a first patient in August of 2023. Medication was approved by FDA for compassionate use in June of 2023. There was some delay due to COVID. But since then, among all my patients, 2 of them, I turn them back to be normal, 100% normal, not only functional, but with their memory, with recalling things, and of course, many other things that patients happens to them when they are demented, with zero side effect. I had no side effect, and patients I had on chemo, when I treated him, even his marker for cancer marker went down. So it's all about inflammation, and medication is safe, is 1 hour infusion, is accepted by FDA for compassionate use, is still under investigational phase. We are in phase 2A. We did more than 500 after it was approved in June, more than 500 patients, and the results are amazing. I hope none of us will get to that point to become forgetful, but unfortunately we will. But good news, there is a hope for all of us. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Arbella. Thank you. All right, everyone, we're going to start the show right now. Nick is going to say, from the best brains, and you're going to say, and beyond. All right, let's practice it. From the best brains and beyond. All right, Nick.
See, done. Okay.
Let's start the show.
All right, ready when you are. All right, welcome to episode 197 of Silicon Zombies, where we bring you the best brains from the Bay and beyond. We get to demystify emerging tech, and we've got a very special treat in the house. We've got Dr. David Eagleman. So thank you so much for you guys to be here. We're at the beautiful Park James Hotel. Want to do a quick shout out for our friends at Necodex. If you're building a product, if you're building a service, that's necodex.com. And they also help you understand agent infrastructure for automating workflows. So pleased to be here. And why don't we kind of, get the ball rolling? Dr. Eagleman, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and lay the foundation for us here, please?
Okay, well, I was told I need to introduce myself. So I'm a neuroscientist. I'm at Stanford. I also write books. I write fiction and nonfiction. And I have a podcast, Inner Cosmos, which hit the #1 science podcast in the nation recently. And that's
no big deal.
And I just thank you.
It's our competition. It's our competition. Congratulations. All right. So when it comes to the brain, what is your specialty? What do you like to talk about when it comes to the brain?
Well, you can't shut me up about the brain, but it's mostly I study how the big picture works, how you ever put together 86 billion cells, a special type, and you get cognition and perception and consciousness out of it. That's my specialty.
So you've said the brain is like a team of rivals competing for control. Which rivals win, and so can you dig into that? What does that mean? This team of rivals?
Yeah, so I proposed this some years ago in my writing. It's that we think of ourselves as individuals, meaning can't be divided. But in fact, you're made up of all these different drives. You've got all these neural networks that are competing all the time. Anytime you're making a decision, let's say you're trying to decide between Coke and Pepsi, you've got certain networks that'll light up that care about the price point, the valuation of it. You have other networks that are about the predicted emotional response to it. You have other networks that care about the social context, meaning what do your friends think? Do they think it's cool or lame? You've got all these things competing. And, even the ancient Greeks had realized this. They said life is like you're a charioteer and you're holding the horse of passion and the horse of reason, and they're pulling in opposite directions and you're trying to keep yourself down the middle of the road. And there's lots of study on this sort of thing. I'll just give one more example, which is short-term versus long-term thinking. If I put some warm chocolate chip cookies in front of you, part of your brain wants to eat it. Part of your brain says, okay, don't eat it, I'll gain weight. Part of your brain says, okay, I'll eat it, but I'll go to the gym tomorrow. You can argue with yourself. You can cuss at yourself. You can cajole. Who's talking to whom here? It's all you, but it's different parts of you. And that's what I mean by team of rivals.
Let's dig into that a little bit, because is there a way to train your brain so that you make the right decision and you make the best decision, you choose the right path every time?
So this is actually my next book. It's on something called the Ulysses contract. So you guys may remember that in the Odyssey, Odysseus, or Ulysses, depending on Greek or Latin, was coming home. He saw the island of the Sirens in the distance, and he knew that these creatures sang songs so beautifully that men would crash into the rocks and die. But he really wanted to hear the song. So you remember what he did?
Yeah, he put stuff in his ears.
No.
Oh.
He put stuff in his men's ears, and he lashes himself to the mast. Exactly right. So that he can't do anything. So what this is the Ulysses of sound mind making a contract for the future Ulysses, who he knows will behave badly when he hears the music waft over the deck. And so he constrains himself so he can't behave badly when the time comes. This, I think, is maybe one of the most important little tricks we have in life, is figuring out what can I do to make sure that I don't behave badly when I'm in a situation where I know I will be tempted.
And there's not much technology back in the day, but there's a lot of technology now. In fact, you've described the brain as a dynamic, ever-changing engine. So what does that look like over the next decade for like brain neural computer interfaces? So how is that going to unfold?
Okay. So first of all, yes, the brain is a dynamic. You've got, as I mentioned, these 86 billion neurons. Every moment of your life, these things are slithering around in your head and connecting and changing the strength of their connection and unplugging and replugging. I mean, it's pretty weird that that's what's going on the inside. You've got a whole inner cosmos going on in there. And this is what's called brain plasticity. I happen to use the term live wired because I think the days of being impressed by plastic are over. But anyway, so when you've got something of this size and complexity that bankrupts our language, we need a new term. So anyway, we've got this live wired brains constantly moving around. As far as opportunities with new technologies, what people have been doing actually since the 1960s is dunking electrodes into the brain, because it's all electrical activity. That's how the brain cells talk with each other, electrical leading to chemical release. And so you can stick electrodes and you can measure the spikes, and you can actually zap them too to make them fire. And so there's increasing opportunities. Essentially, think about it like just expanding our brain in the sense of, you could have things that are external. For example, I could control a robotic arm by thinking about it, by devoting a little bit of my neural real estate here towards this robotic arm. I could control that thing. It's exactly the same process as me controlling my flesh arm, but you just have some neurons that are devoted to that.
Can we go back to the rivals?
Yes.
Every single one of us has the friend who's the king or queen of bad decision making. They always choose the wrong friends. They always, choose the worst job. They always choose the wrong boyfriend or girlfriend. Is there any hope for that person ever choosing the right, like this thing with rivals? Because They have a gift of always choosing wrong.
Well, I would combine these two things and say because of neuroplasticity, yes, there's always hope. I mean, we all learn, we mature through life, and you learn from your mistakes. That's what brain plasticity is about. Is look, the fact is your brain is locked in silence and darkness inside your skull. It's 3 pounds, and it's trying to figure out what the hell's going on out there. And so it tries things out in the world, and it learns from its mistakes. So yes, there's hope for your friend.
All right.
Unless you were asking for a friend.
Yeah, let's move on for the rivals. You've studied time perception. Why does time slow down during a car crash? And why does time disappear entirely when you're scrolling on Instagram?
Yes. Okay. When I was a kid, I fell off the roof of a house that was under construction, and I busted my nose on the ground below. And the thing that struck me as an 8-year-old was that the whole fall seemed to take a very long time. I was thinking about Alice in Wonderland on the way down and how this must have been what it was like for her to fall down the rabbit hole and so on. Whole thing took a long time. When I got to high school and took physics, I realized that the whole fall took 0.6 of a second. And I couldn't reconcile how those two fit. So when I became a neuroscientist, I started studying this and realized that no one had ever done an experiment on this. So I set up an experiment where I dropped people from a 150-foot tall tower backwards in free fall, and they're caught in a net below going 70 miles an hour. And I built this thing that I attached to their wrist that flashes information at them in such a way that I could measure how fast they're putting together their perceptual world. And I tested, do people actually see in slow motion when they're in fear for their lives? Punchline is, no, you don't actually see in slow motion. What happens is you're laying down denser memories, because really this is all memory is for. When shit's hitting the fan, that's when you say, write everything down. So you've got these essentially a secondary memory system in your brain that writes things down. It's mediated by the amygdala. And so when you have denser memory, as soon as you say, what just happened? What just happened? Then you've got all this memory and your brain estimates, that must have taken several seconds, even though it didn't. As a side note, by the way, people always come up to me after my talks when I'm talking this and they say, hey, I don't think that's right because I was in a car accident. I know when slow motion. And I say, okay, look, the guy who was sitting on the seat next to you who was screaming, did it actually sound like he was saying no? Because if not, that means it was not going in slow motion. But anyway, so the point is our perception of how long something took is all about how much memory we have laid down. And that's why any kind of intense experience in retrospect seems to take a long time. I'll mention something, which is that when you're looking in the forward direction, time flies when you're having fun. And it's because you're not consulting your watch and so on. It seems like, it just disappeared. But retrospectively, you come home from some wild weekend and you say, my God, it's been so long since Friday. It's Monday now. So much has happened. But if you just live a boring weekend like normal, it seems to have disappeared. Okay, so with Instagram, it turns out that there's not a lot of landmarks you're laying down. You're getting all these little, maybe that's interesting. It's sort of a gamble because many of them are not so interesting. And then you get to the end of that, you have very few memories that you've written down, and 45 minutes have passed, and you can't figure out where that went. So it seems like time disappeared.
Speaking of memory, there was a test that was done recently with 2 groups of toddlers, and they both showed them a toy. And the first group, they had them go play. And the second group, they had them go take a nap. The next day, they asked the toddlers, what is the name of this toy? 80% remembered that took the nap versus 30% that went to go play. So does this mean that memories or that sleep is important? Does it get written into our hippocampus and then downloaded to the cortex later? Or can you kind of unpack that for us?
Yeah. Yes, people discovered a few decades ago that sleep is really important, and more recently that naps are usually as good as a night of sleep in terms of consolidating memory. So just, think about sleep as like your brain goes in this completely other state. It's like when you have one of these Intel factories that switches over completely to make a different kind of chip. Anyway, your brain is going back and forth between these states every 24 hours. And you need that other state to actually consolidate memories. So that's been the big lesson there. Yeah.
Let's stick on that topic here. We're going to talk about COVID, so hopefully no one will get triggered. One of the side effects that we saw over and over again was brain fog. Do you have a hack for brain fog so that people can focus and concentrate longer, even if it's like a 10 or 20 second hack?
Yeah. No, I think that's a particularly hard one to do, but I would say what brain fog is, what it illustrates to us is what any kind of drug illustrates to us, which is that cognition and consciousness is extraordinarily fragile, and Mother Nature puts so much effort into getting everything to run just right. And all you need to do is throw in a drug or a virus or whatever, and it's very easy to knock it off course. And, I'll just mention, people ask me all the time what I think about psychedelic drugs and so on. To my mind, the biggest what it tells us is just how fragile our consciousness is. You just stick some invisibly small molecules in there, and then you're talking to silver leprechauns or something. And Mother Nature could never build a society, a civilization that builds, hotels and governments and so on without having a very straightforward consciousness where we can all interact with each other.
Well, I guess, can I just ask this one follow-up? Oh, the low-hanging fruit question is, because you study the brain and because you understand the brain better than arguably everybody in this room, what do you do to hack your own brain? How do you optimize your brain? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, look, the truth is it comes down to the basics. It's sleep, it's diet, it's exercise. And there are all these other things that people get excited about, and the internet airwaves are filled with this stuff about nootropics and this.
What about NAD? What about a supplement?
Yeah.
What about vitamin C?
I think
Who wants a shortcut, obviously.
There are many vitamins and things that you have to make certain that you're getting enough of. And if you have a reasonable diet, you will be getting enough of that. I think it's perfectly great. Look, Brian Johnson's a friend of mine. I love the stuff he's working on. But a lot of these things are they're at the edge. They give marginal improvements. And I think it's totally worth trying some of this stuff. But fundamentally, 95% of what you're going to get out of longevity and health and clear thinking and so on is concentrating on sleep and sleep hygiene and diet and exercise.
But if we were to look for a shortcut, and you were given, say, like $100 million or $1 billion, how would you design the next chapter of the human brain?
Well, I actually have been working on that in the sense that my last company was on creating new senses for humans. So I gave a talk at TED in 2015 about how we could create new senses and plug new information. Here's the short version, is that your brain, as I mentioned, is locked in silence and darkness. And so all it ever receives are electrical signals along cable pathways. So, whether that's, you've got these organs that capture photons, there's an organ that captures air compression waves, or, mixtures of, pressure and heat and itch and temperature, or molecules and whatever. But it all is spikes in the brain. All the brain ever sees are spikes. So I realized you could actually pass new information in. So as an example, I built a vest. This is what I presented at TED. I built a vest with vibratory motors for people who are deaf. And the vest captures the sound, and it turns into patterns of vibration on the skin, which is what your inner ear, your cochlea, is doing. It captures sound on the eardrum and busts it up in different frequencies and ships it off to the brain. That's what the vest does, and deaf people can come to hear this way. We then shrunk that down to a wristband, and deaf people all over the world wear this. I just sold the company to a big European conglomerate. Thanks. Yeah.
And so you teach at Stanford?
Yes.
What do you teach?
Right now I'm teaching brain plasticity. Next quarter I teach literature and the brain, because that was my first love. And then the next quarter after that I teach the brain and the law. I also squeeze in there public communication of science.
What's the brain and the law?
I've for many years been interested in what I call neuro law, which just has to do with the fact that, in America, we have the highest incarceration rate of anywhere in the world. And what we do is here's the thing, people commit crimes for very different reasons. So if you're a judge, you might have 5 people show up in front of your bench and they've all committed the same crime, but this guy's got schizophrenia, this guy is, poor, this guy's a psychopath, this guy's tweaked out on drugs and so on. And the fact is we can route them along different lines into the future instead of imagining that incarceration is a one-size-fits-all solution. So I'm very interested in all the things that we can help with in the brain to concentrate on rehabilitative strategies rather than simple punishment.
Well, no, dive into that a little bit deeper. So what has worked that you've seen in terms of this brain rehab? Well,
okay, so I'll tell you one thing that I've been able to implement in many places, but counties only implement it once they run out of money. What happens is they realize, wow, our jails are stuffed. We need to build a new jail, but we can't afford it. So that's when they're open to this idea of having specialized court systems. So you have a specialized mental health court where the judges and jury have expertise in mental health, schizophrenia, things like that. They know what it is, they know how to recognize it, they know what to do with it. You have specialized drug courts where they know about the different rehabilitative strategies that are available for drug addiction. What we've been doing for decades now is our war on drugs attacks drug supply. But that doesn't work because that's like a water balloon. When you press it down somewhere, it comes up somewhere else. You have to address drug demand, which is the brain of the addict. And so we have all kinds of methods, from pharmaceutical up to real-time feedback and brain imaging, to help people with drug addiction. Anyway, by having these specialized court systems, you get a much better system out of it, rather than taking someone with mental illness or drug addiction and just putting them in front of a jury of 12 peers of their neighbors.
Speaking of which, do you think it would be feasible in the future to give somebody the same experience of being on a hallucinogenic, but just altering the chemical impulses, or so not actually taking the drug, and so you could turn it off as well, or what's?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. Right, because all that the chemical does is it binds to certain receptors in the membrane and it changes things by 5% with the firing rate or whatever. But if you actually had a way to control what the neurons are doing, you could presumably generate anything. And I'll just mention something, which is all the excitement has been on sticking electrodes in the brain. I mentioned that's been going on since the 1960s. It's been getting better and better. And a company like Neuralink isn't doing anything new, but what they're doing is they're making the electrodes really fine and robotically inserted, and then it's wireless. But it's the same idea that's always been going on. But I don't think that's ever going to be enough as far as brain-computer interfaces go, because you can only talk to and listen to, a small handful of neurons away, maybe up to 1,000 or something, but out of 86 billion, that's not going to get you very far. So I think the future is in nanorobotics, where you're actually swallowing a capsule of, really tiny little robots that swim around, go into the brain, impregnate the different neurons, and then you can actually read and write from all 86 billion neurons. Then we can really crack the neural code. Then we can do things like, give someone a drug trip and then turn it off as soon as their 5 minutes is up or whatever.
Neuron impregnation. Did you hear that, Huma?
Yeah.
Let's go
spicy.
Let's go back to what you were talking about, which is, the criminals and the brain and the courts. When you talk to politicians who are the ultimate decision makers and you explain this, how does that conversation go?
What's really interesting is everybody is in favor of this, but there are the forces that are against this are, by the way, equally on the right and the left. This often comes as a surprise to people, but the main thing that stops prison reform in California is the left wing. The California Prison Guard Union is the largest union in California, and they are completely opposed to rejigging the prison system because they're all employed by being prison guards. So anyway, it's a very complicated issue. A lot of people are in favor of it, but it's really hard forces to push.
But incentivization, you'd think, would be a fairly easy thing to address and be, objective about, right?
I wish, but I mean, if your job, the thing that you do, is on the line by some new reform, then you're not going to be in favor of it.
Go back to the classes you teach. You said brain and law. What was you said brain and literature.
Yeah, brain and literature.
What's that?
Well, I've been very interested in this issue that, when you look in any neuroscience textbook, and I actually, wrote a neuroscience textbook, which is used at Stanford, and I'm just as guilty of it. The whole textbook is about here's how brains detect where they are. Here's how you pick up on the photons. Here's how you pick up on the sounds. Here's how you pick up on what's going on around you. Great. But then you pick up a book and you look at these arbitrary squiggles on a page and you're transported into a completely different world. And the fact that we can unhook so easily from the here and now and find ourselves in, Westeros or wherever the hell we are, it's so incredible. It's something that's not really appreciated or studied or talked about in neuroscience. So I've been very interested in that. And I think, look, here's a point, which is that really most of the brain is about internal feedback. So just as an example, the eyes connect through some stops to the back of the brain, the visual cortex, but really it's only 5% of the input to the visual system is coming from the eyes. All the rest is feedback. And you can have full, rich visual experience with your eyes closed. You do that every night when you dream. And that's all internal feedback, and you're seeing stuff and whatever. Anyway, I've come to think of literature as a guided dream where the author is saying, okay, look at this. Okay, now look at this. Now look at this. And we just have this dream-like experience where we're taking all this internal activity and experiencing it.
I'm glad you brought up dreams. When you teach, do you talk about dreams? Is there anything you want to tell us about dreams that we're maybe unaware of?
Well, yeah. Okay. So I don't know if you know or not, but so I proposed a new theory about why we dream about 5 years ago. I published this, and I think it's right. And I think this is the answer after many thousands of years of thinking about this, about why we dream. Here's the short version. Because of brain plasticity, if you go blind, your visual cortex gets taken over. The other senses like hearing and touch and so on will take over this territory because the brain doesn't let any land lie fallow. Okay. It turns out that this process we just recently discovered is much faster than anybody thought. So if you put people in a brain scanner and you blindfold them tightly, what you find is that within about 90 minutes, you start getting activity in the visual cortex when you make a sound or when you touch somebody. So in other words, you blindfold someone and the brain thinks, oh gosh, I guess my eyes are no longer working. Okay, fine, I'm going to start taking over that territory. And what I realized was because of the rotation of the planet, we end up in darkness for about half the time. And so that puts the visual territory in danger of takeover, of encroachment from the other senses. And so what you have is this very ancient circuitry in the midbrain that every 90 minutes just blasts random activity into the visual cortex. That's all it does. Just every 90 minutes, blast random activity in. Dreaming essentially is a screensaver. That's what it's doing. It's making sure it's protecting the visual cortex against takeover from the other senses. So my student and I did a very careful study across 25 species of primates and looked at how plastic their brains are. In other words, how susceptible their visual cortex would be to takeover, and how much dream sleep they get, which you can measure from rapid eye movement. And it correlates perfectly. So the more you need to protect your brain from takeover, the more dream sleep you have, and humans, turns out, have the most dream sleep of anybody.
How does that protect us biologically, though? Because like the brain is always trying to keep us alive, right? Isn't that kind of, or what is the brain for?
Well, the brain is a prediction machine. So your brain is making an internal model of the world out there so that it can predict what to do next and how to operate in the world. But in this case, this is just this very super specific, simple circuit that just pops activity in the visual cortex every 90 minutes. That's all it is, primary visual cortex. And by the way, all animals dream. This is across the entire animal kingdom, all the way down to houseflies. You've got the same circuitry.
And are you guys able to see what a dog is dreaming or a lion?
In theory, we could actually. In theory, we could. Some of my colleagues have done the stuff recently where they put people in a scanner and they show them like hours and hours of visual images and videos and things like that. So you know what you're presenting to the participant and you're measuring what's going on in the brain. And you can put together a pretty good mapping that way. And then you let the person fall asleep in the scanner and you can make a pretty good estimate of what they saw in their dream. Because, the synapses that are hot from the day, that tends to be your dream content. And they can look at what's going on in the visual cortex and say, oh, were you dreaming about an airplane that was flying across the ocean and blah, blah, blah. And, yeah.
When do you think we'll be able to be conscious within our dreams? In fact, there was a really cool movie called Waking Life. That's like 15 plus years ago.
Yeah. So this is what's known as lucid dreaming, where when you're in a dream, you come to be aware that you're in a dream and you can take control of the dream, but you don't wake up. So this is lucid dreaming. There are all kinds of ways of training to do this. And it's very interesting because, as I said, the reason I gave this analogy before about, like switching over a whole factory to do a different thing is because the brain can actually get caught in different states in between. And lucid dreaming is this very fine state where you are still asleep, but you're conscious that you're in a dream and you can take control of it. By the way, I just want to mention about neuro law. There have been 88 cases in North America of homicidal somnambulism, which is where people have killed people while they're asleep. And this, goes to court. It's investigated very thoroughly because it's, everyone's reaction is, oh, that sounds like BS. But in fact, you can show what, if somebody's got essentially a problem in their brain where it tries to jump from the sleep state to the waking state.
Hold on. Let's talk about that for a second. Are they killing people that they know, or are they killing people that they have no idea who they are? Because this sounds very convenient. You're in a divorce the woman's about to take you to the cleaners. All of a sudden you're sleeping, you kill that person. You're like, well, I was asleep.
Pretty interested in this.
Yeah. Is this for a friend again? No,
I think it's BS too.
Okay, right, exactly. One is totally justified in reacting that way and thinking, yeah, it sounds like BS. But look, there was a guy named Ken Parks in Canada who killed his mother-in-law and wounded his father-in-law, and he loved them. He had a very close relationship with them. He had this problem where his brain would not fully wake up, and so he actually got in his car, drove across town, and stabbed them, and then when he looked at his hands, he realized he'd done something. He drove himself straight to the police station. He said, "I think that I have done something," but he was asleep during the time. Yeah.
Wow, that's depressing. Let's end. I'm gonna ask one more question. We're gonna open it up to you guys. Why do 100% of us hate Zoom?
Oh, well, that's easy enough. I mean, I think it's for the same reason that my dog doesn't really understand what's on the television, because my dog is used to smell and, there's other senses that are involved. And it's the same for us, where, first of all, having a face staring at you the whole time is very uncomfortable. We don't usually sit like this with each other. And also, it sucks being in meetings where you can't see what people's reactions are, see what their body language is, stuff like that.
So, well, I want to ask a political question, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to hold myself back. All right, we're opening it up. Yes. You really want it? I'll ask it at the end. Let me start with her, and then I'll go to you.
Hi, I did my bachelor's at Stanford, and I got to teach at the lab of Dr. Robert Sapolsky. And so I want to ask you about cortisol and plasticity. So that's one hormone, and also oxytocin and plasticity, because females, we worry about oxytocin a lot. So
yeah, the general story is all of the hormones and neurotransmitters and neuromodulators are in a great big dance with one another. And so many of these situations call for plasticity, as in, what is it that's stressing me out? I got to make sure I keep track of that. What is it that I am bonding with in love? I got to keep track of that. So there are many things that cause the brain to say, okay, I'm going to make sure I take a good note on that. But in truth, it's all of these things in a big concert with each other. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a question. Is there any interest in doing research and find out brain mechanisms that have to do with archetypes, the Jungian archetypes and, the universal subconscious and those things? Or is that too obscure?
Well, tell me what you mean by archetypes. Do you mean different personality types, or do you mean something different about like what? Yeah.
Meaning, how would I say, universal patterns that exist in everybody's brain, right? That's the Jungian psychology. Is that true? Are there such processes? I think we are at the stage where we can find out.
Yeah, maybe. I think that's a great question. I really appreciate it. I think it's extremely hard to get a grant to do something like that. No, I mean, just realistically, we get grants from the National Science Foundation, National Institute of Health. It's difficult to do something like that. And I'm not positive. I just got to think about how it is you would ask the question to see. I mean, if you ask the question about some archetypal thing or whatever, and you get some brain activation in these little spots, what does that actually tell you? It doesn't tell you it's a universal archetypal issue. It just tells you that this person had two parents and that person had two parents, and so they both have these things that come up when you, yeah. Thanks for the question. That's good. Yeah.
Hi. I am writing a book.
Great.
And I am painting in it. And writing and painting is almost insanely difficult to do in a 24-hour, 48-hour period of time. Do you know what that might be?
You're saying to switch back and forth is hard?
Like in one day, do just one switch, but it's too hard.
That might be a personal thing, only because some people.
Nemirov.
Okay.
It is.
I think I could write and paint within.
It's well known as it's almost impossible for somebody to do both.
Okay. I don't know the answer to that then.
Okay.
Hi. Quickly, why can some people not remember their dreams and other people can always remember their dreams?
Yeah, there's something really interesting about dreams. When you are dreaming, first of all, you got. So I mentioned this is very basic circuitry, but there's a couple other pieces to it. One is that your body gets paralyzed so that you don't act out your dream, and the other is that your hippocampus gets shut down so that you don't remember it. Why? Because it would be really confusing if you couldn't tell the difference between dreams and not dreams. So typically your hippocampus shut down, and that's why you can't remember dreams. The interesting part, of course, is that you can remember it for the first 15 minutes, right when you wake up. And so people can practice, we have a pen and pad right next to your bed, and as soon as you wake up, you write it down. That's a really good way to recall your dreams and set them down. Yeah. Sometimes though, people have hiccups with their hippocampus or something, or maybe their circuitry is just slightly different, so they tend to remember them more. But there is something I find fascinating about the forgetting of dreams, which is I think it gives us insight into what it would be like to have Alzheimer's disease, because you wake up and you think, oh my God, this just happened, that, and then it just goes away. And then 15 minutes later, you just cannot remember it at all. And that's what it's like when someone has Alzheimer's. They say, okay, I'll be downstairs in 5 minutes. And they hang up and they're doing something, and then it just fades away like gossamer.
Hold on, before you ask your question, in your professional opinion, is it important for us to remember our dreams? Should we be writing them down? Should we be recording what happened?
My colleagues and I have different opinions on this. I do not think so. I think it's like sticking your head in the night blender, and I don't find dreams that interesting. But anyway. All right.
I just have a question about the efficacy, or what do you think is most for influencing your brain in terms of biofeedback or neurofeedback, or what you were talking about earlier, the Neuralink. Do you find any of them more effective than others for influencing how?
I think I would say it depends on what it is you're trying to do. So,
Right.
For example, with meditation, some people report that they can get better and faster meditation if they're using, let's say, EEG that's measuring, what's going on. Are they in a meditative state or not? It gives them some sort of feedback, like maybe something you're holding or maybe a visual. See, yeah. Okay, so great. Each one of these things has totally different approaches to it. One of the things that's a pretty exciting area right now is transcranial magnetic stimulation for depression and anxiety. It's had really good results. And so for any of you who don't know, it's just, zapping the brain with a magnetic field, and you're essentially disrupting the neurons underneath in a particular area, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. But what you get, my interpretation is that what you're getting is you're sort of making the whole area more flexible and plastic. Okay. And what that means is when people get depression, it's often that, I think this thought, and then that always leads to this grim, bleak outcome. I always think this is going to lead to some bleak thing. And what you're doing is by sort of loosening up the tissue, you then let the thing reform and maybe get better pathways. And you're giving a second bite at the apple that way. And what happens with a lot of people is they get a TMS treatment, maybe it doesn't work, then they get another one, and then it does work. So I think it really is just giving a fresh shot to the pathways.
Hi, David. A question about brain and literature. What fascinates me about literature is the author has constructed this world that you're invited into. And what I've done a few times, often I'll go back and read a book that I read as a teenager or a child, from like the Bobbsey twins to Pride and Prejudice. And what fascinates me is that world. I'm going back to the world that I constructed when I read it the first time. And there's something comforting and familiar about that. And is it as simple as memory, or is it something else going on?
Here's what I would say. You actually can never go back to anything about how you really were younger. But I take your point that you can sort of remember some of the feelings and so on. The really interesting part to me is that authors can't actually transmit what they're feeling and what they want to describe. This is what's fascinating to me about language. It's so low bandwidth. They're just tossing some words over the transom, and in your brain, there's a whole world that grows up, and you can come back to that world and visit it. But in your brain, it's a totally different experience. I'm a fan of Ernest Hemingway, but I read this article, this interview with him recently from 1950, and he said, if an author is talented enough, he can, implant in the reader's mind what he is seeing, and he's wrong about that. He's just totally wrong. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah. So I used to have dreams that I remembered, and as it turns out, I would have a continuation of a dream over an extended period of time of months, maybe even years. and it would be like a long story, and there'd be the same characters, and I mean, it was like chapter 1 and chapter 10. I mean, just kind of, that has stopped for me now, and I would really like to bring it back, because it was a really fantastic experience, because I had such great adventures.
I would say two things about that. One thing is, okay, so the first one is just a caveat, which is sometimes it's a little hard to know, because we can be so fooled so strangely in dreams, where you're having a dream and you think, oh my God, I've been here for years and years. I've had this dream so many times, and maybe you haven't, but it depends if you wrote it down. If you actually wrote down your dream every night, and so you have evidence that it's the same dream, great. But the way that people will try, no guarantee, but they try to get back is if they have been writing it down, they really study that, and they do things to think about that dream and that situation, those characters, right as they go to bed.
Hi. Question. You've mentioned taking control of the dream. Can you unpack that a little bit more? Is that a skill that we want to develop? Is that good or bad?
Yeah, it's a good question. People have been studying lucid dreaming for a long time, and seems to be no ill side effects to it. And so, yeah, taking control of your dream is saying, wait a minute, I think I'm in a dream. The way that people use technology for this is for example, imagine you're wearing a night mask and it's got an EEG in it, or an electrooculogram even, and it can tell when you've moved into REM sleep. And then when it tells that, it flashes red lights above your eyelids, right? Okay, so you're in a dream. Let's say this is the dream. And suddenly everything starts flashing red, and you think, wait, what the heck? Why is everything flashing red? And then you realize, oh, wait a minute, I must be in a dream. And then most people fly or have sex. That's the things people do. But you can, or sometimes both. Yeah. But anyway, that's what it means by taking control of the dream. And sometimes this is useful for people who have post-traumatic stress disorder. They can actually confront the thing that they've been really haunted by in a dream.
So I work with imagination and wonder and well-being. So my question is kind of a segue from the dream talks. What do you think about the advantages of mind wandering? And also a lot of meditation practices are about fixing your mind, focusing, paying attention. So what do you think about mind wander and wonder versus that fixed attention state for the health?
Yeah, it's a good question. So generally, the brain is always balancing between two states, which is it's monitoring the outside world for threats and opportunities, and it's monitoring your internal world and reminiscing and simulating possible futures and whatever. And so you're always balanced between these two. And when you're in a new environment, let's say you pull up to the Park James, let's say you haven't been here before, you're trying to find what's going on. You're completely paying attention to the external world, but let's say you got a room here and you went to sleep, you're in your internal, or you're sitting there thinking or meditating or whatever. Okay, so that's the balance. I have several smart colleagues who seem to, who are really advocating for the importance of mind wandering and meditation. I personally don't do too much of that because I'm too busy to meditate, and they tell me I'm exactly the type of person who needs to meditate, therefore. Anyway, but apparently it's got all kinds of good benefits, and for relaxation and other things like that, and probably knowing yourself better. Yeah.
Hey, hi, this is Jonathan. So my question is that how does brain handle trauma and even near-death experience? Because I think in some cases, going back to the source of the trauma may help to build the resilience. So to give you some background, I actually drowned in the ocean beach 30 years ago and got rescued, actually from a coma. So, but through those years, I actually have been completing 12 different Ironmans. In fact, I have another one coming up in a month. So
excellent, good for you. Yeah. The thing with trauma is, I mentioned before that you've got sort of the specialized second track of memory for emotionally salient things. And so for something traumatic like drowning, you're going to write down that memory. And the problem with amygdala memories is that they're just constantly coming up. And by the way, those are unerasable. Hippocampal memories, just as a weird side note, are actually erasable. People showed this in labs starting 20 years ago. You can train a mouse to run a maze. He memorizes the thing. And then you give him like a protein synthesis inhibitor, and then he can't retake the memory from the hardware into the software back to the hardware, and he forgets how to do the maze, but he remembers everything else. It would be like, by the way, people get this from head trauma too. Like if I asked you to remember the name of your third grade teacher, and then God forbid, let's say something fell from the ceiling and hit your head, then you would forget the name of your third grade teacher forever. That would be gone. because you've brought it up from cold storage into activity, and suddenly your head is hurt and you don't remember it anymore. Amygdala memories are not erasable, though. And so what people do is they figure out how to write over it, how to come up with circuits to, whenever they think about that, to go off in a different direction. That's, for example, what cognitive behavioral therapy is, things like that. So anyway, that's what trauma is. It's your brain saying, wow, this is the most important thing that's ever happened to me. Don't forget it. And of course, it's really awful to experience it. Yeah.
Before you ask your next question, I have a question.
Yes.
In all your years of studying the brain, contextualize to this day, what do you consider to be the biggest mystery of the brain?
Oh, that's easy. That's consciousness, which is so consciousness is the thing that flickers to life when you wake up in the morning. And the reason it's such a tough problem is because we can measure stuff and talk about stuff, but it's not clear how any activity that we can talk about equals the, whatever, the beauty of a sunset or the pain of pain or the redness of red or whatever, the smell of cinnamon or something. So like if I gave you a billion Tinker Toys and asked you, okay, look, hook these up any way you want here and keep adding, like at what point do you add one more thing and say, great, now it's, experiencing the taste of lemon pie or something. Like it's very difficult for us to realize how you can ever take the physical stuff and translate it into the realm of the subjective. So, triple integral, carry the 2, that equals that. Like it's just, our languages aren't the same for those things. And that's why that's such a tough problem for us. Yeah.
Hey, David. About 6 years ago, you gave a talk that was really influential to me and caused me to shift my career into longevity. And I've been excited by all the progress that has existed in longevity science, but I'm worried and I'm scared about the fact that we're making a lot of progress in like cancer therapies and diabetes and obesity, but I haven't seen a ton of progress in Alzheimer's therapies. Am I right to be worried that we might get a whole bunch of people living a lot longer, but being zombies from 110 to 140?
Yeah.
Is there a fundamental reason why we haven't made more progress in Alzheimer's? Will we start making a lot more?
Yeah. Great questions and super important. Part of the reason we haven't made more progress in Alzheimer's is because for years, the whole community was chasing some wrong ideas. And the idea there's these plaques and tangles, and everyone thought, hey, if we could just bust those up pharmaceutically, that would solve it. But those are like the exhaust of the system rather than the cause of the problem. So anyway, it turns out that didn't work. The good news is there are labs all over the planet who are right now, they've got grad students staying up late and pipetting and doing things. So people are really working hard on this problem. It's got a lot of funding. It's got a lot of energy behind it. So I can't imagine it's going to take too much longer. That said, when I was a first-year graduate student a long time ago, I went to the Society for Neuroscience conference. I thought, oh my God, there are 10,000 people here. The whole thing's going to be solved by the time I'm done with grad school. And that has not happened. So these problems are tough because, this is the most complicated thing we've ever found in the universe. And so it's not easy, but there's always new things happening and new hope. Yeah.
Hold on one second. I have a question. When you look at, because you talked about brain and literature, when you read old textbooks, I assume you've looked at the old ways that the Greeks and the Romans and the Persians looked at the brain. For many years, I'm sure there was like an idea that the Greeks or the Romans or the Persians had that everyone's like, that's ridiculous. The brain doesn't do that. And now today you're like, wow, they got it right 2,000, 3,000 years ago.
There's actually none that I can think of like that. And here's why. No, but I happen to be a real history buff about this kind of stuff. But the fact is, first of all, for most of human history, no one cared about the brain because the brain is like a big lumpy thing and you'd have no idea that it's really complicated. So, the Egyptian, everyone would just toss it out and they'd keep the liver and the other part that they thought was more interesting. Anyway, when people did start making theories about the brain, which of course we realize when people get brain damage, that's, they can change their decision making, their risk aversion, their ability to understand music or name animals or see colors or a million other things. So people started realizing that was important, but it's always predicated on the technology that's available at the time. So when people were working with hydraulics and whatever, that was the model of the brain. It's a hydraulic thing. And then when the telegraph system was invented, boy, then everyone started thinking about like a telegraph system. Then electronic switchboards for the telephone systems, everyone started thinking about the brain that way. Then it became digital computers. By the way, Johnny von Neumann he always used the brain as an analogy for the digital computer he was building. But anyway, nowadays we tend to use the digital computer as an analogy for the brain. But we're entering this era of large language models, and there's all kinds of ways that's tweaking our metaphors. None of these metaphors are perfect, but they all do lead to progress, because as soon as you start thinking about something in a particular way, then you run a certain set of experiments, and each technology that comes along leads to forward movement.
So if the neural networks is kind of how we're thinking about the model now, what is the next model we're gonna be using?
I mean, look, here's the thing. Artificial neural networks, like we build LLMs out of, those are like a cartoon version of the brain, in the sense that you say, okay, look, neurons are really complicated. They've got these big tree-like shapes. They're connected to all this stuff. But I'm just going to assume it's a unit, and the units are all connected to each other. And I'm just going to dial the connection strength, the weights. That's all an artificial neural network is. But in fact, the real brain, you've got receptors in the membrane, and you've got very complicated biochemical cascades inside the cells. You've got different compartments in the cell where you have different things, all the way down to the DNA. Every cell in your brain has the entire human genome in it, and it's expressing all these proteins and suppressing the expression of others and whatever. And all of that stuff is missing in an artificial neural network where you just have a circle. So anyway, I think there's, we're not anywhere, as LLMs are so impressive. And I'll just mention that for those of us in neuroscience, we, most of our career, we sort of snickered at AI, like, oh, AI is not doing so well. But all of a sudden, 4 years ago, we all said, wow, this is incredible what's going on. But it's still, there's a lot more room to go before it starts acting like a brain.
Hi, I have a question on a different topic. So I lived across this country and back again, and I noticed that the Bay Area probably has more psychics and intuitives per capita of any city I've ever lived in. And I'm just curious, have you guys ever researched their brains to see how their brains function in comparison to other people?
That's a really interesting question. Not that I haven't. I don't know of anyone who has. Yeah, I don't know I can imagine there are many different reasons why someone would become a psychic. Either they happen to be the kind of person that is okay with scamming people, or they believe, or they're delusional and believe that they're seeing the future, or whatever. I mean, there are a lot of possible reasons there, but it may be a collection of reasons that all lead people to that career path. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, hello. So about 20 years ago, Daniel Dennett wrote a book called Consciousness Explained, which sounds like you're familiar with it. And it was designed for people to make it understandable to laymen. And he just went through just the scientific, how it works, how consciousness actually works. And the way he described it was very counterintuitive. It was much different than what you'd expect. There's no Cartesian theater. Really, it's just a matter of short-term memory. Could you speak a little more to that and what we know about that now?
Yeah, I mean, part of the idea, and by the way, this is consistent with what I was saying about time perception, is that you're not actually experiencing the car accident. What you're experiencing is what just happened, and you're reconstructing this stuff. And that's, of course, consistent with Dennett's view on this as well. Some people in the field sort of meanly said it should have been called Consciousness Explained Away, because it doesn't actually explain consciousness. It's just a way of saying, this is a way of pointing out some important pieces that have to be part of the theory, but it doesn't actually explain how you take physical stuff and make it conscious. For example, my Mac laptop has about the same number of transistors and so on that my brain has neurons, but I don't think it's conscious to my knowledge. When I play a funny YouTube video, it doesn't find itself amused or something. And so the question is, what is the difference there? We could obviously make sure that we hook it up in the way that has everything Dennett has in it, which is that it says, okay, what just happened and whatever, but it's not clear that that's an explanation for consciousness. Yeah, go ahead.
I've seen Buddhist monks and psychics and do some amazing things where, they could sit under a freezing cold and actually produce heat, et cetera, et cetera. Are they advanced humans? Have they actually improved their brains compared to the rest of us?
I can only tell you my opinion, but I think it's party tricks. So what you can do if you actually train up on this is you can like change your blood flow. You can consciously change your blood flow so that, you know, you can even do things like get more blood flow and more warmth to one arm than the other and things like that. But when you really think about the depth of the unconscious mind and what's going on there with 86 billion neurons and all the stuff that you can't even access, the fact is that the unconscious brain, we have almost no access to why we believe what we believe, how we do the things we do. You know, if I asked you, okay, wait, how exactly do you walk? How do you keep your body balanced while you're walking? How do you ride a bicycle and make sure that your torso stays and such? Like, you can't explain any of that stuff. We don't even know the most basic things about what we do. Anyway, that's such a giant area that when somebody can do something like change their blood flow, I think, hey, that's cool. I can't do that. But I don't think of it as like a very deep thing. It's just a shallow thing. Let me just give a 1 second example. Everyone put your hands up on your steering wheel. Put your hands up on your steering wheel in front of you. Okay, you're riding in the center lane up El Camino. Make a lane change into your right lane. So move from your, okay. Yeah, very good, very good. I'm glad you're, okay. Okay, I can't say it, but it appears that everyone did it wrong. So what I saw you do is turn the wheel to the right and then back to center. What that would do is turn your car to the right and then you bump over the sidewalk and crash into the hotel. The way that you make a lane change is you go to the right, back to center, just as far to the left and back to center. That's what you do every day. And you have no idea how you do it. Why? Because your brain's taking care of stuff, so much stuff for you that you don't even have access to how you do it. So anyway, look, here's what I'd say. I don't mean, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm being Mr. Skeptic here, but if you were to bring a psychic to my lab or something and show me this person could do something, anything that they claim, I would write a science or nature paper. I mean, it would be like the biggest event of the year for neuroscientists, but unfortunately, this has been studied in great depth since the 1960s. People have, Duke University opened the Rhine Laboratory just to study ESP and psychic events and whatever, and eventually it shut down because they couldn't find evidence for anything. So that's just where we are. I'm totally open to anything, but the evidence has to be there.
Before you ask your question, we're going to do 2 more questions. So you, 1 more, and then we'll end with Leslie. Oh, you have a question too? Wow, this is a first. All right, go ahead, sir.
All right. Hey, David. So my team and I are launching a competitor to TikTok in 2 months. And I just want to ask you a question. So what would you say is the kind of lasting impact on social media on kids, kind of the younger generation? And how can social media platforms wire their algorithms to be more positive towards kids of the younger generation?
So I'm so glad, first of all, congratulations to you. And I'm so glad you asked that question because I just recently patented a new social media algorithm. We should talk afterwards about this. But specifically, we were going to talk about politics. We never got a chance. But what I'm very interested in and have been studying in my lab for years is about polarization and what causes polarization and why we're so predisposed to have in-groups and out-groups. And we can understand the logic of our in-group and whatever, and we dismiss the out-groups and so on. Okay. I've been studying this for many years, and I realized there's really just one good solution to getting people to bond more. And that is very counterintuitive. It's the complexification of relationships. So what I mean is, look, I don't know you, you don't know me, but let's say we both discover on a new social media algorithm that we both love golden retriever dogs and we both love to surf and we both love this particular band and this particular football team. So all that stuff gets surfaced and we come to like each other and we say, wow, we're, what's your name? Mickey? Okay, so yeah, Mickey and I, we're pals. We got all this great stuff in common. It turns out there's some political issue where you and I have opposite opinions on some hot button issue. That doesn't get surfaced until later, until we've already reached some connection strength. And only then does it get surfaced. And then I'm much more willing to listen to you, Mickey. I'm interested in you. I'm like, wow, how could you believe that? Let's chat. So anyway, that's the solution, is complexifying the relationships and surfacing all the things we have in common.
Sandra, you should ask your question. Sandra's next. Okay.
Hi. So my question would be about, is it true that our heart has a stronger electromagnetic field than our brain?
So there's a couple things here. So it is the case that there are electromagnetic fields because just like the brain, the heart uses electrical signals to sense effect. But it's not clear that that has any meaning to it. I mean, the adapter for this guy's laptop has an electromagnetic field also, but the fact that that might be stronger than your heart doesn't tell us anything in particular about whether it's involved in cognition or perception or who you are.
We don't study that. Like you don't study that, like the mind and heart connection. Like
No, that's really clear. People can get their heart replaced. You can get a pump, a pulseless heart because something's going wrong with your heart. They take it out, they put in a brand new thing. You don't have a pulse anymore because it's just continuously generating the flow, and you're no different as a person. That's how we know that the heart isn't part of your cognition.
I know we're not getting to everyone. David is an extrovert, and he is going to hang out for at least 45 minutes afterwards to answer your question, talk to you. All right, so
happy to do it.
But Sandra, this is a first, everyone. Nick's wife.
Yeah, I heard a story like 2 weeks ago that was like I was in shock. This lady started to lose her control over her body. She got sick with a syndrome that I don't remember right now, but basically it's a syndrome that her brain is completely normal, is there, but her body completely shut down. So she start to lose everything of the body, like every movement or the way to communicate with their family or the hospital to make her like a move here and there for the pain. So the last thing that she lose was like she was able to move one of the eyes, but then she completely like lose that part, and she find a way to manage her brain and have the heart rate like a beating so hard every time that they do a question like, hey, you wanted to move to the right or you wanted to move to the left. She was telling that she was completely aware of everything. She was exactly her, but her body didn't function. And the way that she find to communicate with the exterior, like the family and everything, was through her heart. So my question is, how, like, I'm amazed with that thing, because I feel like the brain is controlling everything, like in that capacity. And also when somebody is very sick for any disease, any cancer or anything, the way you acting in front of that and change your perspective and the way you see these things may you feel better and may you heal faster or better. So my question is, that's possible?
Cool. Well, okay. So what you're describing is called locked-in syndrome, and this is one of these terrifying things of, dozens of terrifying things that can happen. But it's not that her brain was totally normal. It's that she had a stroke in her brain stem, which cut off the communication channel between her brain and her body. So you're absolutely right. The brain controls the whole shebang, and if you have a very miniature stroke there, you can get locked-in syndrome where you can't move. Did anyone read the book, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, by Dominique Bobby? He was just, if you don't know, he was the editor of Elle magazine in Paris, and he, was on top of the world social life and everything. He had one of these strokes, ended up with locked-in syndrome. He was only able to blink his left eyelid, and what happened is his friend came in and would recite he would recite every letter of the alphabet in order of frequency, and he would blink when she got to the right letter. And in this way, he wrote the entire book, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, with these blinks. And it's so horrific. And he ended up dying 3 days before the book came out and became an international bestseller. But the point is, the brain is doing all the stuff, having clear thinking or whatever, but can't control the body anymore. With this woman, presumably the way she got her heart beating was just thinking of something scary or thinking of running or whatever it was to make her heart beat faster. And that was very clever of her to come up with a way of answering the question. But the good news is, as we get better at implanting electrodes, at nanorobotics, eventually this kind of thing, people won't be in that situation anymore.
Yeah, she wake up after 8 years, and now she cannot walk anymore, but she's complete normal, basically. Wow. But it was an incredible story.
Our final question.
Am I on?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Leslie Lang. In case you forgot from last time, I'm single and a Gemini.
And Leslie.
And not only do I come to this every time to learn great things and meet interesting and smart people, I come here to find out where the single guys are. So if you're single and have a really, really big brain, I'll see you after this. I'll see you after this. Okay. So Human said that you were just the appetizer, and I'm thinking that makes you the amuse-bouche, and this makes you the tossed salad. Anyway, I'll get to my question. So the whole Daniel thing and the transhuman, where they're putting we're using machines and putting them, that's something that's interesting. But what's really fascinating to me is this neurologist. She was in a kayak and she got stuck underneath for 20 minutes, like under the water for 20 minutes. They brought her back to the hospital and they somehow got dead for 20 years, dead, brain dead. She could hear and see everything that they were doing to revive her. So what about that, Brainiac? Help me out with that.
So great. I'm glad you asked that question. I feel like I'm being put in the position to be a Mr. Skeptical Pants here, but I got to tell you that first of all, it is the case that people, they freeze in a lake or whatever and they get revived. So people can be dead and come back. It is very, very easy, shockingly easy for the brain to enter hallucinatory states or dreamlike states. So people often have this thing, I was doing this or that. Here's the interesting thing. Lots of the reports are totally bizarre. Like, there was an elephant and it was I was in a circus, whatever. And then everyone ignores those. Okay, someone says, I saw everything that you were doing. So years ago, a surgeon who was getting a little tired of hearing these things, or wanted to test it, I should say, what he did is here was the surgical operating room. He put a sign up on the shelf with a big blinking word. So you can't see from down below, but if you were hovering above the table, you could not miss that thing. And then he asked her, okay, well, what was the word? I was hovering above the table. I saw the surgery. Okay, cool. What did the sign say? Oh, what sign? So that's, look, the fact is it's a big, complicated world. We don't know everything, but there are ways to test things. And generally, subjective report is not enough.
She said everything that doctors said, not just I'm floating up there and I'm here. The words, and she told the other doctors, they're like.
I mean, you know how these stories have a tendency to get better and better each time they're told, right? I don't know. All right. Awesome.
So, okay, thank you. So Sandra's going to do the raffle in just a quick second, but let's do a round of applause for David here. Is there anything how can folks connect with you? How can the zombie community, which is over 80 countries, how can we be valuable to what you're building?
Oh, thank you. My podcast is called Inner Cosmos. And if you're interested in this kind of stuff, listen to Inner Cosmos.
Very cool. Thank you. All right, Sandra, go ahead.
Okay, good luck for whoever wins. Okay, so no, I have all the people that repost. Yeah. So I'm just gonna scroll down and pick somebody. Oh yeah, just pick a name. Get the like this, and just tell me the name that is on top.
Anu Basu. Anu Basu.
Who is?
Are you here? All right, give it to someone else.
Must be present to win.
Curtis, are you here? Curtis Ashford.
Curtis.
Curtis is not here.
All right, one more. Oh, Curtis, yeah, there you go.
Yay!
All right, everyone.
I'll give you the code.
Oh, we're gonna do a couple more.
Yeah. It's 3 more. 3 more. Yeah.
Oh.
Use my brain. Put it out there.
Can you read this?
Oh my God, without
Oh,
glasses.
no.
All right, here, I'll read it.
Okay, Su Xiao.
Oh, ZHUO.
Xiao.
Yeah, there's our guy.
Hey, okay, meet me. Okay, I'm gonna get another one. Robert H. Lee.
Robert, yeah, come up here, Robert. Robert, come up
And the
here.
last one will be, let's see, Tenny Piñeiro. Tenny Piñeiro. It's not here. Okay.
Tenny once, Tenny once, twice. All right.
So Sander Gray.
Sander.
Sander Gray.
No.
Oh my God. Okay. R.H. Lee.
No.
People is not here. Mickey Wright.
Mickey. All right. All right, everyone. David Eagleman will be here. Hang out with him. Talk to him. He'll answer your questions. Anything else, Nick?
That's it. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the evening. And for more of the best brains, siliconzombies.com.